Hi guys, how are you doing today? Welcome back to Random Lifestyle Vlog. Today we're going to be testing another eyeshadow palette, and this is the new release from Natasha Denona. This is her mini pastel palette. So I decided to buy it because it does look interesting to me, and I definitely like her midi palette that she released last year. But now that I'm looking at it, I have to admit I have some doubts. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but let's just have a proper look first, and then obviously I'm just going to show you all the swatches, and I'm going to try and create a makeup look with this palette. Okay, so there you go. This is the palette. Let me just show you the shades here. So as you can see, we have only one matte shade, and this is the green one over here. Everything else is metallic. So even without like trying, I can tell you straight away that this is not going to be a super easy palette to use, especially if you are a beginner. You have only one matte to play with, and then you have like 4 shimmers. So pretty much the whole look has to be based on shimmers, and those shimmers might be a little bit tricky to, you know, mix so that you can have like a cohesive look with it. So we'll see. Okay, so let's compare this to the midi palette that was released last year. This palette should be like an extension to it, so let's compare them. So this is the midi palette. As you can see, this is like a perfectly pastel palette, and this is our new extension palette, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, it has this matte green here that kind of complements the green shades that are here. We only have this one kind of like matte mint green over here. Then it has these two kind of blue shimmery shades that kind of also makes sense because we have like 2 blue mattes over here, and then we also have this pink shimmer over here and this kind of like a golden sparkly shade. So it seems like Natasha Denona really likes creating these kind of extension palettes. Sometimes they make more sense, sometimes they don't really seem to make much sense. This one actually does make sense to me. It feels like if you are buying this palette as an extension to this palette, then it definitely makes sense. But the real question is whether this palette makes sense as a standalone palette. So let's start with the swatches first. So we're starting with Aurora. This is duochrome mint with gold and pink shifts. Oh, that one is actually really nice, so a good start for sure. Then we have Twiggy Metallic Icy Baby Pink. There you go. Well, this one is not particularly visible on my skin, so yeah. I mean, I guess you can see a little bit of that, but this is literally it, so that's interesting. Next up we have Ontario, which is Metallic Icy Sky Blue. There you go. So next one is Ari Matte Aqua Green. That is actually quite surprising, I have to tell you, because look at the length of that swatch. I mean, usually with Natasha Denona's mattes, they are like really buttery and they like swatch for ages, and this one, it is pigmented, but I don't know how I feel about it. Okay, the last one is Sea Star, and this is Sparkling Metallic Muted Cobalt. So there you go. So these are the swatches. There are a couple of colors here that I like. I really like this duochrome here. The cobalt one is pretty as well. But I'm not really sure how I feel about it just yet. Obviously, it's not really fair to judge a palette just by the swatches. I actually learned my lesson last time with a Huda Beauty palette, where I remember the swatches did not impress me that much, like color-wise, but the palette actually in the end allowed me to create like really nice look. So who knows, that might be the case in the situation as well. I'm just a little bit surprised that this matte didn't really swatch as well as, you know, what I would normally expect from Natasha Denona. And yeah, some of these shades are not very like visible on my skin, so I'm just really curious how these would actually transfer on deeper skin tones. Natasha Denona created quite a few makeup looks with the use of this palette, but most of them are kind of like graphic kind of color looks, so that's not something that you would use every day. That's more like editorial makeup for like a photo shoot or something like that, and I'm more curious whether you can actually create something that will be more like a, you know, regular use, something that you can just apply on your face and then just go out and interact with people. I mean, obviously some of us wear kind of like very fancy graphic makeup as the regular makeup, and that's completely fine too. But I'm kind of wondering if I could create something that's a little bit more kind of toned down with it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to think about it for a moment, try and create something like off camera, and I'll be back with you to recreate this on my other eye. Okay, so this is the look I created. I do like it, but I definitely have a few thoughts I would like to share with you. So I'm just going to try and recreate this look on my other eye, and so that you can see how these shades actually work together, and then maybe in the meantime I try to kind of like tell you what I think about it. So I'm going to start with this shade over here. I'm just going to apply this with my finger like all over my eyelid. So this shade, as you can see, it doesn't really have a lot of like pigmentation, but it gives you this kind of like a wet almost skin effect. It's actually really pretty. So probably my favorite shade in this palette. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the only matte shade that we have here, the green one, and I'm just going to apply this in my outer corner and in my crease. For that, I'll be using this fluffy but quite small brush. So let's go ahead and do that. And obviously I'm just going to blend it out with a clean brush. So my next step is going to be my lower lash line. I'm going to be using this cobalt shade over here, and I'm going to be applying this with a precise brush on the outer part of my lower lash line. So just a little bit here. Luckily this one is quite pigmented, so that way we can actually I don't know, just use it here. I'm going to accentuate this outer part a little bit more. I was wondering whether I should just kind of blend it in, this kind of like green over here. It should blend because these colors are like next to each other in the color wheel, but I just decided to leave it like that. So halfway through, and then on the other half of my lower lash line, I'm just going to apply this kind of like icy blue shade. And this one, to be honest, doesn't really transfer that much on my skin, but I mean, it's this kind of like a shiny, very kind of pale blue color. I mean, it is visible to some extent, but it's not something that just kind of blows my mind. To finish off this look, I'm going to use the last shade, which is the pink over here, and I'm going to apply this in my inner corner. So I'm applying this here, and this time I'm not going to try and blend it into like the surrounding colors, because to be honest, this one is a little bit like a different part of a color wheel, so it will just give me this kind of like a muddy results. So that's why I'm just going to blend it like in, but make sure not to blend it with the surrounding shades, which is, you know, green over here and blue over here. So yeah, okay, so there is that. I feel like there's something missing, so I decided to add an eyeliner in this kind of like a blue shade. This one is Illuminati gel paint in shade Electric Blue, but I think any blue eyeliner will be fine. And I added this in my waterline and like all over my pretty much a lower lash line here. So waterline, I kind of like dragged it a little bit out just to make it more visible, this blue pop of blue. Okay, so there's that. I'm just going to do my eyeliner and mascara off camera, not to make this video longer than it needs to be, and then I'll be back with my final thoughts. Okay, so time for my final thoughts, and this is what I think. And that's a little bit weird because I'm like literally used to saying pretty much all the good things about Natasha Denona palettes, but this one I'm not so sure. I mean, okay, hear me out. This is obviously a very colorful pastel palette, so, you know, buying something like this, you can't really expect this to be like super easy to use and like very kind of foolproof. It does require a little bit more creativity, a little bit more like, you know, you just have to be quite adventurous to use a palette like that. I do feel like this palette, unless you want to do like graphic makeup, it does not really give you many options though. It is going to be great if you want to recreate some of Natasha's ideas, or I don't know, or maybe you are just creative like that and look like that kind of graphic eye look, then I guess this could be good, right? I can't tell for sure because I haven't really tried it that way, and this is not really that much of my thing. That I don't think I would just feel comfortable like walking around town like wearing this crazy kind of like graphic makeup, but that's just my opinion. I do feel like if your expectations are similar to mine, if you're looking for a palette that will allow you to create a colorful yet quite wearable makeup, then this palette might not necessarily meet your expectations. I do feel like this is going to be a brilliant addition to the MIDI palette. So if you're buying this one to, I don't know, get some more like options with your MIDI pastel palette, then I guess it's going to make sense. And I'm certain that I'll be using this palette quite a lot in addition to this palette, and I'll be happy doing that. But as a standalone palette, do you need it? Just think about how you would use it, because if you're anything like me, that's not the type of palette that you can actually create multiple looks with it. To be honest, the look I created today, I like it, but it's not like I could create like hundreds of different looks with it. It seems like they will always be quite samey. You have only one matte, so that kind of like gives you like limited options, I would say. So all in all, I think the quality of the palette, I mean, the shades actually transferred quite nicely. I was a little bit worried about some of them, especially the green one that didn't really swatch as well as I expected. But it is actually really nicely pigmented. It blends nicely, so that was good. I still feel like these two shades that you can like barely see here, they are very kind of translucent, and all they give you is a little bit of this kind of like a shiny color, but it's not something that's going to pop in your makeup. So for me, this palette only makes sense as an addition to the MIDI palette, but that's just my opinion. I would love to know your thoughts, guys. Have you purchased this palette? Have you used it? Are you thinking of buying it? I would love to know your thoughts. Thank you very much for watching. For more beauty related content, check those videos over here. I'm going to see you very soon. Take care. Bye.